and I know I've said this a lot in this video, but I really mean it this time. What is that thing? Really, I'm being serious. What is the Strider supposed to be?
Well, I think I figured it out.
But seriously though, what exactly is the Minecraft Strider? Like, what animal is it? I think I might know what it is based on our rules of anatomy and biology, which we know exist in Minecraft because the mob bestiary exists, as well as it having animals in our real world in the game itself. So this thing is probably not an invertebrate. I don't think this thing has... I think this thing has bones, like internal bones, like we do. So right there, that is a huge sigh of relief. Now we're only down to 5 groups of animals: fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal, and bird. Now, I don't think this thing is a fish. It doesn't look or behave like a fish, so it's probably not a fish. Now we're only left down to 4. And this is when things start to get a little bit tricky, because the other remaining 4 is harder to find that out, especially with something that looks like this. I think we can narrow it down even further to about 3. Let's start out with the mammals first. Now, the reason why I don't think it is a mammal is because I'm going based off what the terrestrial mammals all have in common, because this thing does not swim through lava. It walks on top of the lava, so it's probably more closely to that of a terrestrial mammal rather than an aquatic one, or maybe even a semi-aquatic one. So that really helps us here, because all terrestrial mammals have similar things. They all have 4 legs and ear bones. Does this thing look like it has ears to you? Yeah. No. I don't think this thing has ears the same way that we have ears, or the same way that Sniffer has ears, which the Sniffer is a mammal, by the way. And yes, I know it has 6 legs, but that's... someone already solved that answer, okay? Let me have this answer. But the huge thing that debunks the mammal theory is it walks on 2 legs. Now, we are the only mammals that walk up on 2 legs. Other mammals, yeah, do sit up straight like we do, but they kind of like hop along the ground, because the only other mammals that have 2 legs like we do, or like walk upright, are kangaroos, wallaroos, wallabies, and kangaroo rats. And yeah, those things don't really walk, they kind of hop. And this thing is not hopping. This thing is walking like a human is. And this thing is not humanoid, so again, probably not a mammal. So now we're only down to 3: birds, amphibians, and reptiles. Now this is where it starts to get really hard, because it walks just like a bird. It walks up on 2 legs, 1 leg after another, just like a bird. It has long, stork-like legs with scales, I'm assuming that's what those are, on the tips of its legs. And it also seems to have little tiny quill-like feathers on the side of its head, kind of like some, well, the Jurassic Park 3 velociraptors do, but other birds have those as well, like some vultures do. So it seems to have feathers and legs. So is it a bird then? Again, I don't think so, because this thing doesn't really necessarily look like a bird. All birds, unlike mammals, look the same. They all have the exact same shape to them. They all have 2 wings, or flippers. Even the ratites, like the emus, cassowaries, and even the kiwis, they do have wings. They're very small, but they still have 2, and then they still walk up on 2 legs. And they all have beaks. This thing does not have a beak. This thing has a flat face. And this thing does not have a nose, was what it looks like. So this thing is probably not a bird either, based on the characteristics that we went over. Doesn't really have a beak or wings. It doesn't seem to have any other extra limbs other than just 2 walking legs. So probably not a bird either. Now we're only down to only 2 animals, reptiles and amphibians, or herpetology. Now this is where it starts to get really hard, because, as you all know, herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians, which means they're both grouped in the same morphological features, which makes kind of it a bit of sense. Little tiny skinks look very similar to a salamander or a newt. So we have amphibians and reptiles being very identical to one another. And this thing has scales on its feet, just like a reptile. So is it a reptile then? Not necessarily, not quite, because its entire body isn't covered in scales. The entire body of reptiles are covered in scales, as we all know. Some are a few exceptions. There are some actually hairy mammals. It is weird. Most of them are extinct now, but again, has hair similar to the ones on the side of the strider's head. But those things don't really look like hair. They're very stiff, more like quills. So I don't think this is what we're dealing with here. And it does seem to have a very flat face, flat, wide mouth, like a gecko. So is it a gecko then? I don't think so, because geckos, they still have scales. I know geckos, because, I have one as a pet. If you ever touched a gecko, their skin is very amphibian-like, but if we look closer, he still does have scales. If it focuses, he still does have scales on his head, all over his body. So he still is scaly, because he still is a reptile. So I don't think it's a reptile that we're dealing with here either. So, based on process of elimination, that only leaves amphibians as the only one there. And now this is where things start to hold out in our favor. Because if you look at a frog, yeah, this thing's head kind of looks like a frog's head. It has a ginormous mouth. Like, the majority of his head is mouth, just like the majority of frogs' heads are mouth. So this thing looks like an amphibian. It also kind of looks like a frog with a giant circle, or in this case, square, body with 2 legs coming out of it. Yeah, I know frogs have 4, but they still have 2 ginormous back legs, which they use to hop. This thing doesn't hop, but there are other amphibians that walk around by not hopping, like salamanders and newts. So, this thing is probably an amphibian, but that still leaves the mystery. What are those things on the side of its head? Well, I think it might be a leftover from its evolutionary ancestors. Thanks to MatPat, we know that the Nether used to not be the way that it is. It used to be an ice age, meaning there was water in the Nether. And what do amphibians have in the water? That is exactly right. They have gills. Axolotls have external gills. So, over time, they probably lived much like a frog, using their external gills to breathe in the water, and then growing onto land just like regular frogs. But with the absence of water, they had to learn to live a lifestyle on land, which is where they get their lungs from, and they kind of haven't really gotten rid of their lungs quite yet. And since all they eat is fungus, they don't really need necessarily their front arms either. They kind of only just need walking legs. So that, I believe, is what the Minecraft Strider is supposed to be. I think it is probably an amphibian.
So, to answer your question, it probably tastes like frog legs.